All right, we're on the air. Hello, my name's Grant, and this is Rachel, my wife, and we've come to do a little movie review with you. We want to maybe post a blog or a vlog of movie reviews of favorite movies that we have. Right now, we're in the Korean drama realm. We've been watching a lot of Korean dramas lately, so we thought it might be good to put something down on record and share our thoughts with you. If anybody has, anything that they want to gather from movies, maybe we can help you out and steer you in the right direction.
So basically, we love to talk about movies together,
Yes.
and we get really into them together, which is one thing we found out when we, after we got married, that we just really enjoyed similar movies, similar themes. We both
Yes.
love stories, we both love talking about them.
Yes.
I actually taught literature for, 6 years to high school students.
Wow.
So I love talking about stories because that's basically what I did as a literature teacher was try to get students to engage with stories and to connect with them and
Right.
to look at the deeper themes because I think that stories are very powerful. So first thing you would want to know about us is we are Christian and we are unashamedly so.
Yeah.
We love the Lord and we seek to serve Him and to glorify Him in everything that we do. And we hope that that also plays a part in our discussions that we have here. And you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a pastor, so yeah, obviously, everything's going to be funneled through the Christian worldview, and therefore, we're not going to review any movies that probably have an R content and maybe even have a PG-13 content, considering the stuff that comes out under a PG-13 rating. Because if we're not going to see it ourselves, we wouldn't endorse it to anybody else. So, and I didn't study literature, I didn't teach literature, but I've been a movie buff since very young. So, I love movies. I have a passion for movies and story. So,
Okay.
Go ahead, babe. You wanna introduce the story?
So, as we talk about different movies, we're hoping that this can be can serve a couple of different purposes. So, number one, if you're looking for a show to watch, and maybe you're a Christian, or maybe you're just someone who is careful about the things that they watch, you can, I'm thinking probably in the future we'll do spoiler-free reviews and then spoiler reviews, so you can decide if you want to see something, if you even think it's worth your time. But also, we want to talk about just have fun with it, just enjoy discussing it, and we're going to talk about the shows or movies under several different categories. So first, just as a show, like, is it a quality show? What's its watchability? How did we feel when we were watching it? Was it enjoyable to watch? Just kind of the straight up basic reaction to the show. And then,
now, does that include replayability?
I would say so. Because if something's really good, it's going to be replayable.
Okay, so if it's watchable, but
Yeah.
some movies are watchable and you enjoy that, but would you want to go into it again? Maybe there's certain themes that
Yeah, that's true.
So
we could talk about that too. It's watchable, but is it also rewatchable? Because we've even found there's some things that we've loved watching, but we don't necessarily feel a need to watch it again. It's just that type of story. But there are other stories that we're like, okay, we're watching that again. We're probably going to watch it again and again.
Yeah.
And then also from a Christian perspective, how can you discuss this story from a Christian perspective? Which I think is the most interesting part of discussing the
sure.
movies and stories. And then we'll talk about things like our personal favorite characters, favorite scenes, things like that. Just kind of enjoying discussing it. So hope you guys enjoy.
Yes. So the first series, okay, it's not a movie, it's actually a series, and it's in the Korean drama genre, would be My Country, The New Age. Now, this is the last Korean drama series that we watched, and we've just finished it up last week, and very enjoyable. A lot of highs, a lot of lows. Okay, so overall, as a show and watchability, or maybe we should just kind of set up what this story is.
Okay,
I mean,
so the
like, how
premise.
do you
yeah.
like set this up? I mean, it's so rich.
You want me to do
with our-
to
yeah,
set
go
up
ahead,
the
set up,
premise?
set up,
Okay,
go.
so I'll set up a premise. I'm not going to give it. I'll just say let's say this halfway through. If you don't want to be spoiled, stop. Okay, so we'll kind of set it up for you, and
Yeah.
then halfway through we're going to be talking about what happens. So if you don't want to know what happens, just stop it there, watch it, and then watch the rest.
Yeah.
But I'll just say like the setup for it. So obviously it's set in Korea, South Korea, which we've just been really enjoying getting to know the culture of South Korea, which is very foreign to us, but is intriguing. And this is set back in the day, so it's I think it begins in the 1300s.
1300s. Yep.
So, and we don't know a lot about Korean history, so please pardon us. Like, we're just kind of scratching the surface. So it's not like we went and studied Korean history, but we have looked up a few things just to understand the show a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it takes place at the time when one dynasty transitions to another. So it starts out with the Goryeo dynasty, and it's the transition from that dynasty to the Joseon dynasty. So there's things in it that are actual history, true to history, and then there's characters that are not. So it's like it's a historical fiction, basically. Some characters are historical figures, and then other characters are fictional figures thrown into the story. But it starts off with basically the main thrust of it is there's two friends. One of them is So-hui, and one of them is Nam San-ho. And Nam San-ho is the son of a nobleman. His father is the head of like the horse stables of the king, so he's high up there. And but the interesting thing about San-ho's character is that even though he is the son of a nobleman, so he has some status, he is the illegitimate son of the nobleman. So his mother was a concubine and was not his main wife. So because of that, he has a lot of issues with his dad.
Yes.
And he also has a lot of issues with people around him because the class system of Korea is very intense, and so people treated you based on how you were your parents and your birth and your upbringing and all of that. But it's interesting because he's best friends with So-hui, who is like a nobody. We come to find out that his father was a somebody, but I won't give that away yet. But they're best friends, and I'll just say, as the story goes along, they're kind of torn apart through everything happening politically, and that's kind of like the setup for it.
Yeah, that's a good setup.
Okay.
I mean, there's so much more that you could say. I mean, we don't want to spoil.
We'll talk about it more halfway through.
Yeah, for sure. But in terms of watchability, okay, so how Korean dramas usually work is that there's usually 16 episodes to one Korean drama series. And in those 16 episodes, there's a plethora of things going on. And there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, there's going to be lulls during those periods of time, certain periods of time, because to give you that much content, okay, you're talking about 16 episodes of longer than an hour length for each episode. So really, it's almost like one mini movie each episode. And I'll just say right off the bat, My Country, The New Age, in terms of production, probably the best one I've seen other than Crash Landing on You, in terms of cinematography, in terms of camera work, just the sights, the acting in it is top notch.
And we've seen somewhere around 12 Korean dramas now.
Yeah.
Since we started getting into them, so that's saying a lot. Like, we've seen some Korean dramas, so we know like what's good Korean drama wise, I would say.
Right. And okay, so what did I like and what did I dislike? I'm just gonna say right now certain things that I disliked about the show. First off, the soundtrack. Okay, now what I mean by that is there's a few good songs on the soundtrack, but there are instances in the show when the soundtrack is playing and you know exactly when you hear that song, that means that So-hui, who is the main protagonist, is about to fight and kill everybody on sight, and there's no doubt about it. And it almost becomes predictable when you're watching the show, and it kind of loses its weight. If you come into a scene and you don't know what's going to happen, and all of a sudden, people attack the protagonist, and you're rooting for him. There's a sense of anticipation of what's going to happen. But once they play this certain song, and you'll know when you watch it, that So-We is going to be victorious. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, and it'll happen like in moments where like the moment is really intense, and you're kind of like you're feeling the moment. You're like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And then that music comes on, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I know they're gonna win. So it kind of. It's like, it's a cool track, but it kind of kills the suspense because when they throw it in there, it's like a dead giveaway for how the scene's going to end up.
It's a little bit predictable. It shows his hand to be kind of cool and modern, hip, and it's kind of a contemporary song set in a historical period. So that's okay. But yeah, in terms of that it was predictable. Another thing that I didn't necessarily think they did a good job of, and I want to be fair, but one thing was the plot, in terms of at sometimes when you're watching the show, it would be hard to follow the plot, and as you're tracking the story, there would be things that are happening, and changes that are being made, whether Sanho is going back home, and obviously his sister, certain things are happening, but there's regime changes that are taking place, and sometimes it's just really hard to follow if you don't know the history.
And there's big time skips, and they introduce the time skips just by like a blurb on the screen. So if you miss that, then you can be very confused about what's going on.
Yeah.
I'll say this about the show. And I have to give credit that I read this description somewhere online, and I was like, wow, that really is a good description of the show. But it talked about how, and I would say this is a good thing, but also it's like a good thing about the show, but it could also be a little bit of a difficult thing about it. And that is that it does not tell you what is happening, it shows you what is happening.
Yeah.
Which is good because it feels like, okay, you're not insulting my intelligence. You expect me to like pay attention and follow along. And we enjoyed that aspect of it because it caused it to be very intriguing. We had a lot of discussions about what we thought was going on. It doesn't tell you characters' motives. You find out their motives. You deduce their motives based on things that happen later. So it just kind of plays out before your eyes, and you have to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
I think if you know that, though, going in, you will appreciate it more if you're aware of that. But at first, when we first started it, we were just like, we got confused at parts and we were unsure. But now that we've seen the whole thing, we're like, that was actually really good. And I actually think, and we've said this before, it's probably going to be better the second time around. Yeah. It's one of those kind of shows that like you want to see again.
Yeah, certain movies are just like that, and certain shows where you're not going to catch everything the first time, especially in a 16-episode series. But it shouldn't be so It shouldn't be so hard to track that you're kind of lost midway through the plot. And I think if you're really not paying attention, you can get lost, and you can really miss out on, a great story. So this one is not an easy kind of watch where you're just kind of sitting back and relaxing and watching a show or whatever. You really have to pay attention, or you're going to be lost, and you're kind of going to lose focus or lose interest because things are happening fast. So I would say that that's another low light. And final low light for me is it's unrealistic in battles in certain instances where people are getting stabbed by swords in the stomach, and a few hours later they're running around like they're fine. So there are several instances where people get slashed by a sword, people lying in a pool of their own blood, and obviously the two main characters, certain things happen to them, and it's not realistic in real life. I mean, I understand, like, it's a movie, and sometimes in a movie you have to kind of forget and just kind of push aside certain things that happen and say, okay, well, they have to keep the story going, but it shouldn't happen like every episode where someone
it's
gets
almost
stabbed.
Like comical, really. Yeah. It's kind of funny because I really like the show so much that part of it is almost something I like now, because it's just like this comical part of the movie. But people get an insane amount of wounds.
Yeah.
And like they get up and they're fine.
Right.
And I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen this is like crazy. Like,
Yeah.
it's really bad.
Yeah.
But I think if you're someone who has a real problem with that, like I've talked to some like my mom, for example. She had a problem with that. She was like, I just can't handle the how unrealistic that is or whatever.
Yeah.
Now for me, I was able to just say, okay, I get it. They're doing this in this Korean drama world. This unrealistic thing is happening where people are, recovering from wounds. Once I just kind of got past that, it was whatever. I just kind of was like, this is what they're doing. And I was able to still enjoy the characters in the show and the storyline.
Yeah.
But just be aware that it's a little ridiculous. In fact, it'd be kind of funny to just like have a piece of paper and mark down every time somebody like gets a deadly wound and recovers. We should do that.
Yeah.
Just figure out how many people survive deadly wounds.
I mean, there's only one character in particular. I'm not going to give it away, but on 3 separate occasions, you'd almost assume that he was dead, and then a scene after that, he's pretty much fine and ready to go again, and you're almost thinking this guy died 3 times in the same show and he's still around. So unrealistic, certain things there that could be made more believable, and but those are some lowlights. But let's get to some highlights.
So I'll ask you. Okay, so just straight up, what would you say? How did you feel, like in a nutshell, watching it? Just like, what was your feelings watching it? How did you enjoy it? Like, what were you thinking, feeling as you watched it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching the show. I enjoyed watching, the actors that were playing the roles. I believe the story was very compelling. It was obviously, I don't want to give too much away, but it's more of a tragedy type of story where it's there's a lot of scenes somber and depressing, and grief that happens to So-wee, and you're just kind of traveling with this guy, and you're kind of feeling his pain in several occasions, and you're following along through the story through his eyes. And I enjoyed watching it because, there's several things that happen to So-wee that kind of really inspire you. Number one. Number two, I love the acting in the movie. The actors were fantastic, very believable, like very, very believable, all very powerful performances by most of the actors. I would say that just watching it, I enjoyed it. There were times, I would have to admit, that there were lulls where I kind of lost interest, maybe somewhere in the middle there, where there were things happening and the action wasn't the pace slowed down a little bit, but they kept the pace pretty up throughout the whole series. I would agree, if you would agree with that. But I felt like the pace was up, and they kept things kind of fresh. They would change things every few episodes where there was a new interest or a new actor or new character that was being introduced that really kind of set the stage for the climax. And I don't want to give too much, so it's hard. But watchability, I would say, is very high. I would say I'm definitely going to watch it again because I didn't get everything the first time. And I think it's meant to be like that, like Rachel said. It's meant to be watched as the story is taking place, but they're not giving you everything about the story. It's not so predictable where you know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to be thinking, all right, is this character good? Is this character bad? What's the intentions of this character? Playing through. So, I think the watchability, I enjoyed it. Beginning to end, there was a couple lulls in the middle, but the ending of the movie is absolutely unbelievable, and probably the best ending of any K-drama that I've watched.
Yeah.
And so you have to hang in there. It's worth it to hang in there until the end because the ending is so good, because they wrap this thing up so beautifully. I would say the watchability is very high, and I'm definitely going to watch it again without giving too much. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah. As a show, what is the watchability rate?
Yeah.
You know.
I thought it was really good. So I thought the first 4 episodes were very exciting and intriguing. But I do think it's one of those shows where like you're interested early on, but you don't know you love it till later.
Yeah.
In the middle, I was worried because it seemed to get a little bit bogged down, like he was saying, probably like around episode 5, in politics and stuff like that. Which I enjoy like political thriller, but I was like, is this gonna go anywhere, or is it just gonna go around in circles? Because it started off so well, but it took turns that I did not expect. And one thing I loved about it was it went somewhere. Like a lot happened in the 16 episodes.
Yeah.
The characters at the end seemed so far away from the characters at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had changed so much and they had been through so much. And that's what I think one of the things I really loved about it. It felt like an epic.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of battle scenes, and some of them like really well done, big battle scenes with lots of extras. So it felt like a big budget almost movie, but sprawled over 16 episodes.
Yeah.
There were moments in this one that I was like gripped, like at the end. It was I've seen like a good bit of K-dramas, and this one was one of the ones where at the end I was like, I felt like I was in a movie, like watching a movie in a movie theater. I was like, what's going to happen? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
And not only do I not know, but I really care about what's going to happen, because I really care about these characters a lot. And I would say a lot of that is the acting, especially by a couple of the characters. The guy who plays Bang Wan, which is actually a historical character, Yi Bang Wan. He's actually a tyrant king of Korea, but he was like the first major king of the Joseon period. But you get to see him before he's king, and he's played by Jong Hyuk, and he was excellent. At first I was like, I hate this guy, why do they keep showing this guy? And then by the end I was very intrigued by his character. Very complex character, which we'll talk about more, especially when we get to the Christian perspective part of things. Very complex character, very interesting, just really, really good. And then I was very impressed by Woo Do-won, who played Nam San-ho. He brought so much emotion to his role, and I feel like that's part of what got me like really into what was happening, because I felt the emotion, and he was a very emotional actor. But he wasn't like over the top emotional. He just felt like he was the character. He did a really, really good job. Those two I think were standouts. The guy who played Sol Hui, I gotta forget what his name is. But he was good too. He
progressed. He got better. He got better as the series, as the series went
on. In the middle,
on.
He kind of was just this one-note guy, but he changed, and by the end, I really liked him.
I don't know if it was really, more of him or more of the, the script,
writing,
and the writing. But one thing I will say before we move on to the Christian perspective, one thing that I guess in the story that could have been better is the female role of, what's her name?
Hai-ji.
Hai-ji,
yeah. Yes.
I had high hopes for Hai-ji in the very beginning, in the first couple episodes. I'm like, all right, she's going to be an epic character, and this is going to be kind of a three-way story,
like a Three Musketeers story,
these two best friends and this other young woman who seemed to be kind of a revolutionary in the beginning, and then what they did with her story and her role was just, they kind of just put her on the back burner, and her story was really not compelling at all. So anytime her kind of, her character came on, it was really, it kind of lost interest, halfway through the story with her character. And I thought that, the romance between her and So-wi could have been developed a little bit more, but I guess you can't do everything, in one series, and, you're going to have some strengths, some weaknesses. But that was definitely a weakness that I saw, that, they probably could have made better. The romance and her character, because she was an interesting character right in the very beginning. but she soon faded out of kind of the limelight, and it was just really Zoe and
Sanho. I mean, at its heart, it's a bromance story, which I love. It's really it's good. It's different. There's a lot of romance stories out there, so it's kind of nice to see like a story that focuses on like a male friendship. But the girl did kind of seem. I mean, she was promising, and I think that's what was hard about it, is you were excited to see who she was going to be and what she was going to do and how she was going to be involved with the guys who are her friends, but then it kind of like, that let you down because she was kind of put on the side. Not that she didn't do anything, but it just wasn't really much, it didn't feel like she was really a part of the main story. So, anyways, but we need to move on. We're going to talk about it from a Christian perspective, but first we'll just kind of say in general, and then I'll just give a warning that we're going to start to get into spoilers, so if you want to turn it off before we get there.
Yeah, turn it off, please.
Yeah, because you don't want to know spoilers. It'll ruin it for you.
Yeah.
It's good when you don't know what's going to happen, but so just before we get into
It's funny.
Yeah, before we get into spoilers, first of all, just like, do you think it's I would just ask you, Grant, if you think as a Christian it's a profitable movie to watch?
I do think it's a profitable movie to watch, a very profitable movie, because although it's not obviously a Christian movie per se, there are always, pretty much in every movie you can learn something. I mean, everything can be funneled through the Christian perspective in the eyes of God, in the eyes of God's word. But one theme that really drives the whole story is this theme of vengeance or revenge. Zoe is.
Don't give it away.
I'm not. I'm not going to give it away.
Yeah.
But I have to. I have to say this. I mean, the main theme is, it's a revenge kind of story, in a lot of ways, for a lot of the different characters that are involved. But what you learn kind of through the movie is that vengeance doesn't pay in the end, and vengeance leaves you empty. And I don't want to give too much away for the story, but through a Christian perspective, right? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Getting back at your enemies, getting back at those that have hurt you in some way and have caused you suffering and pain, it's not ultimately going to fulfill you, and it's going to make you feel worse in the end. And that's kind of one of the things that you learn in this movie that I really appreciate, because a lot of movies today will promote vengeance, and they'll say, okay, I got him at the end, or I killed that person that got me, and now I can go. I can name several, like John Wick, where he goes and just kills, everybody in the movie, and it promotes that vengeance and killing. But we're called, obviously, as Christians, to even suffer pain and grief and different trials that evil men cause against us. And the reason why we do that is because we trust in God, and God is sovereign over all things. And so God will have vengeance, and our justice will be vindicated in the end. And I think that there's something about that in this movie that you gain an appreciation for. So I'll leave that there. I got another one, but I want you to kind of enter in if you have anything for the
before we get into the spoilers, I just wanted to, first of all, like, just from a ratings perspective, just kind of surface level, if you were just to kind of rate it, there really is, as far as sexual content, there's really no sexual content there besides, like a kiss. So it's very clean in that respect.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There is a lot of, I'd say there's a pretty good bit of, like, blood that you'll see. There's a lot of sword fighting. There's a lot of that.
I mean, there's certain things that
yeah, so you want to be careful. I mean, depending on, if you're showing it to your kids, like, you want to realize that, recognize that there is some there's a lot of graphic stuff in it.
Yeah.
There's even a little bit of, like, interrogation, like, where they might be kind of, doesn't get into detail, but they're kind of like maybe threatening to torture someone in order to get information, things like that. So that's just kind of the basic rating, I would say, of it. Yeah, well, I think one thing I at first I wasn't sure about it, because like he said, I mean, you don't really know until the end, like, what they're trying to say sometimes.
Right.
So the characters are, many of them are flawed, and so at first it was like, well, who's like the redeemable character in it? But I think, like he was saying, kind of like Monte Cristo, where like you figure out, the characters kind of learn things, by the end of it. They kind of come back to the truth, or they learn the truth unfortunately through things that they've done. But I don't want to give too much away. But I think that we'll get into it more now that we're getting into spoilers. So I guess now I'll just say, if you don't want to have any spoilers, just turn it off now.
Please leave.
And watch it, and we hope that you enjoy it.
Yes.
And that you come back and we can discuss it once you have seen it. So we'll kind of pause for a minute to give you a chance to do that, and then we're going to get into, for those of you who have seen it, we'll get into a little bit more of a detailed discussion.
Cue elevator music.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Now we're back.
So, now that we're talking about it in more detail from the Christian perspective,
yes.
I think that in the end, you come to there are several truths that are brought out. Like Grant just mentioned, that the characters in the end come to see, especially So Hui, towards the end, he comes to see the futileness of living for revenge, and he even also comes to see the futileness of living for even just ideas of power, and ideas of like, oh, well, if I have this power, then I will, be able to do the things that I want to do, and just seeing like, hey, running after this is like running after the wind. It kind of reminded me of Ecclesiastes. That's
right.
Kind of like what I would say was one of the themes, and even Sanho at the end, I think he also saw the futility of his quest to, he felt, his problem was he felt like he needed to vindicate the fact that he was an illegitimate son, and he needed to somehow prove himself. And one line that he said at the end, which I thought was really powerful, he's talking to Hui, and he says, I always thought there was two paths, the worst path and the less worst path, but I didn't realize that I could have chosen just completely, not done that and chosen the right path, and I would have been much happier. And it's sad, but it's good to see that at the end his character was redeemed, and that he came back to that truth, and his death had meaning. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
really. I mean, I'll just mention another one is Bang Wang's character. So Bang Wang is basically he's the tyrant. He's the son of the king, and there's this theme that runs through with fathers and their sons, and the father's lack of love for their own children. And you see what kind of corruption and how that, that really breaks up the relationship, obviously, between the father and son. But really, there's this bitterness and anger and resentment from their sons towards their fathers. Mm-hmm. And so...
And also, like, this desire, like, this inward desire. It's weird because it's like... And we're talking about Bang Wan and Sanho, because both of them have issues with their fathers who are evil, and also try to get them to do their dirty work for them.
Right.
But it's sad to see the conflict in that, like, there's this resentment towards their fathers, but there's also this, like, strong desire to prove themselves to them.
Yeah.
Which is sad. Yeah. And I think that's where, like, while I'm watching it, I'm like, man, like, if they knew the gospel and they knew Christ, they would realize that they don't need their fathers to validate who they are.
Right.
They could have their identity be in Christ and have freedom from that. But they're in bondage to that, and that's part of the problem for both of them. However, their outcomes are very different.
Right. And their fathers, obviously, if they took a biblical approach, I mean, to love your son and to not just treat him as, you know, this, you know, like an object, like you're my fifth out of 8 sons, and you know, you were a sword to me.
Yeah.
You know, basically using your son as a tool where you're supposed to show, you know, the love of God towards your son, and you're supposed to cherish that. And it is, I mean, it's heartbreaking to see, like even in the movies, but I mean, obviously in reality, you know, what is the reason for our culture, you know, the way it is right now and how it's splitting up. And you know, one of the reasons is you know, the lack of fathers, you know, in the home, and whether it's leaving their children or neglecting them in some way, it's ravaging our young people, and it's like a cycle that keeps building up, you know. It you know, from father to son, and then that son grows up to be a father, and he's neglectful to his son, and then that grows up, and you know, and it just keeps going round and round. And this is what you're seeing in this dynasty that's portrayed in the movie. And so Bang Wan is this, you know, is one of 8 sons of the king, and he desires the throne, just like his father desired the throne, and he, you know, finally usurped the king and that whole dynasty, and they took over. But you see in the movie, and I don't want to be too long, but it like almost power corrupts. It corrupts the heart. And power corrupts.
I'd say that's a huge theme.
Power corrupts the heart of Bang Wan, and Bang Wan is my favorite character, and I'll get into that in the next section. But what we see is, like, Bang Wan is a very interesting character because there's instances where you see the good in him. You see
the image of God.
He cares about So Wee.
Yeah.
And you know, there's this relationship, almost like a bromance between him and So Wee, because So Wee, and I don't even think we've mentioned this, he's the greatest warrior, you know, in that country at the time. Like, everybody looks to So Wee. He's the greatest sword,
even though he was a nobody,
right? Just
because of his skills.
Yeah, and his father was a great general and the greatest warrior, you know, at that time. And obviously he passed down his skills to So Wee. But Bang Wan, you know, he brings into the fold So Wee. He cares for him, even you know, he's on his deathbed, and Bang Wan kind of heals him and cares for him. And so there's this relationship. But at the end of the day, So Wee is not going to he's not going to kill his best friend. What's his name? Sanho. I always forget his name.
Yeah.
He's not going to kill his best friend, and he's not going to kill innocent people in order for Bang Wan to get the throne and become king. And that's where their allegiance and friendship really ends.
Yes.
And it's sad, because they could have had something so much better.
Right.
Or Bang
and in
Wan
the end, like Bang Wan says, it's interesting because there's, at the very end, Bang Wan kind of says, "I failed to make you mine." Like, he wanted loyalty from Hui, which Hui was loyal to Bang Wan, because he did trust that Bang Wan had a noble plan for the country, you know, the country of the abandoned. And he believed in that. But in the end, I think Bang Wan wanted, like, ultimate loyalty. In other words, you're loyal to me above everything. That means, like, principles, other friendships, other relationships, everything. And so when he said, "I failed to make you mine," it was because ultimately Hui was going to fight for Bang Wan, but not at the expense of, number one, his dearest friend, which was Sanho, and then also, number 2, the innocent people of the village that, you know, the innocent villagers who were loyal to his father. He wasn't going to allow Bang Wan to get rid of them. And he wasn't going to allow just this kind of bloodshed that Bang Wan just was like, well, I'm just going to, you know, go scorched earth and wipe out everything and start a new regime. And So Hui was like, you know, it doesn't matter what ideas you have or ideology you have that you think justifies that. Nothing. And you hear this line over and over in the show where he's like, where So Hui is like, nothing justifies killing someone. Like, you know, someone's life, people's lives are not, you know, nothing compared to an ideology. So there's always this theme where, you know, even like Sanho's father, Nam Jon, he's like, well, you know, we have to kill these people because it's a sacrifice for the greater good. And Hui is like, you know, nobody's worth sacrificing in that way.
Yeah.
Corruption is not worth something better.
No.
It's not,
Right.
well, we got to do these little sins in order to get something greater. And I think
Yeah.
that's a very biblical principle.
For sure.
When God calls us to do something right, he never calls us to do bad things in the name of right, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes people can think that, well, I got to do
Yeah.
this, but it's all for a greater good. Well,
Yeah.
there's always a way to obey God in everything and not to have that option. And ultimately, if you have to do bad things in order to get the outcome you desire, then it's not God's will for you to go after that outcome. Or you need to go after that outcome in a different way. And so I think that that's where Hui and Bang Wan they couldn't, that
Right.
romance fell apart.
Yeah, it fell apart. But that's what I love about Soi's character. He stood true to his convictions, which was ultimately good. That he did not want to. He even knew that it was going to cost him his life, and spoiler alert there. But he stood by his convictions to do good, and he saw what vengeance does, what power does, that it destroys, it kills, and he did not want that to define his life. And so in the end, Bang Wan, obviously disappointed that I wanted to have you. There were many other soldiers, many other great warriors that Bang Wan owned because they didn't have the conviction that Soi did. Soi was willing to die, for his friend and for others. And I mean, that's Christianity 101. I mean, even Christ, there's no greater love than this, than one dies for his brother. And you can kind of see, obviously, they're all flawed characters. So he's a flawed character, but that in that essence, or in that scene, you can kind of see a Christ likeness where, Jesus, is called to go to the cross to die for sinners, and he could have just said, this is going to be too difficult. I'll bow my knee to Satan, and
which is what it's interesting because most everyone else in the show is doing that.
Right.
And I think that's what makes both Hui and Hui's father as well. I think Hui's father is honestly one of the noblest characters of the entire show, even though we barely see him. We only see him in flashbacks, but we come to realize that his father, Sogom, who's the greatest swordsman at the time, and was a general of the punitive forces, that we know in the beginning that he died, that he was executed. He killed himself, but he was forced to do so. But we don't know why until later, and we realize later that at the time when it was still the Goryeo dynasty, and Bang Wan's father was just a general but was wanting to take over the throne, that he was getting Bang Wan to do his dirty work for him, and one thing he had him do was arrest Sogom on false charges in order to try to blackmail him into fighting for him. And Sogom basically said, no, I'm not gonna, and he tried to tell him, oh well, Bang Wan's trying to tell him of, like we discussed earlier, this idealistic dream of what they want the country to be, and he says, well, you say you want like a country with no corruption, but you're corrupt, and what you're doing is corrupt. So I'm not gonna go through with it. And he becomes kind of a martyr because of that. Yeah. And we see most of the characters in the show, just they bow down to anything as long as it saves their life, or
right.
Anything it's always self-serving. So I'll do anything as long as I can get whatever I can get out of it. And we see that especially in Nam Jon, Son-ho's father. Yeah. Because just like a lot of politicians today, he flip-flops all over the place. I love it, by the way, when the girl calls Son-ho pancake.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, you flip-flop all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, pancake, what?
Yeah, for a lot of these guys, the ends justify the means. So, for Nam Jon, his whole character, or his main drive or motivation is that he wants to make a better world for the country. And so, whatever means necessary by which he can influence the king, any means necessary where he can influence the king. It doesn't matter how many people die. The means justify the end. So if that all leads to a better country, then those people were sacrificed for the greater good. So obviously not a biblical principle there. So you're seeing many different Christian themes kind of come into play. But I'll just leave it with this, and obviously spoiler alert. But at the end, you see Sanho's Sowee's friends there, like kind of gathered, a year later, all together in kind of peace and harmony, and you realize kind of what Sowee and Sanho died for. Mm-hmm. And it ultimately was for the love of their friends and for peace. And so it kind of ends in a high note, where they're kind of reflecting on Sowee and Sanho's sacrifice and what they did, and that's how they'll be remembered. So like obviously you're thinking about legacy and how you want to be remembered. Obviously, it doesn't really matter how we're remembered here on earth, because ultimately, if you're a believer in Christ, all that matters is what God thinks, and what is your legacy in terms of how God views you. And if you're in Christ, then you're perfect. So, but I think it ended well. What do you think?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing.
Yeah.
As far as the Christian, just for the Christian perspective part of things, before we get into other fun things about what we liked about it and stuff like that. I thought it was interesting, like we said before, that Bang-Wan and Sanho were basically the same character, and Bang-Wan even says that, and that's one of the reasons why he spares Sanho's life on several occasions, because he sees himself in Sanho. But what I thought was interesting was that Sanho's character was redeemed, and what I mean by that, obviously, like, he didn't become, not redeemed in a spiritual sense, an ultimate sense, because the story is not a Christian story, but redeemed in that he kind of repented of the life he was living, and in the end he died for what was good. But I think the difference between Bang-Wan and Sanho was the unconditional love of someone, the unconditional love of a friend. And I think that Bang-Wan didn't have that, and you felt that too. You felt that kind of sorrow deep in Bang-Wan, that his father did not love him unconditionally. Even Hui was not willing, he had this twisted idea of how we should love him, but, it wasn't right. But I think Sanho would have probably, his character could have easily ended like Bang-Wan's, but I think it didn't, because Hui loved him unconditionally, and even after, Sanho stabbed him, and, all these crazy things happened, he was, like, pursuing him. And I love the scene where he says, after he stabs him, he basically looks up and he's like, "I'm going to save you." Yeah. And it made me think of just a little example of, how we are redeemed, by Christ. Because really, we're all in the same boat. We're all sinners, and what causes people to be able to completely change the direction of their life. And it's the unconditional love of Christ coming down and rescuing them and saving them. Yeah. It has nothing to do with what they do to earn it. And I think that's, like Sanho, he was a great friend before. It's not a perfect analogy, but at that time, he was he'd fallen so far. Like, he'd done many wicked things, and yet Hui just loved him unconditionally, continued to pursue him. And I think that was why, in the end, he changed, and Bang-Wan didn't. And I thought that was kind of a powerful analogy, that they had those two characters kind of, up against each other. Yeah,
that's a good point, and that kind of shows you a little bit of a, gospel kind of, illustration there. I'll be a light one, but I did like, and I remember this. I felt like it was one of the most powerful scenes in the entire show. It was at the very end, after Sanho and Sowee die in Bang-Wan's palace. Bang-Wan is seen on the throne, but he actually is tearing up, and he says, "You did well," and he's talking about Sowee, and he said, "You did well, did well," and it was really powerful, and it kind of just, you almost grieve for Bang-Wan.
He deep down, he respected those guys.
He did.
Like, he had to get rid of them because the throne was more important to him than anything. But deep down, he respected Sanho and Hui.
He respected, and I do like this about Bang-Wan. He was true to his principles. Like, he did say that, he did promise. He made a promise to Sowee that if Sowee sacrificed himself, then Bang-Wan would let the he wouldn't destroy the entire entire villages and just start all over. And he was true to that promise. And so he did have his principles, Bang Wan. He wasn't just like this mindless tyrant that just killed everybody and just was just wicked. He's a very interesting character. He's very real. But you see and you grieve for him at the end because he cries and he says, you did well, so you did well. And one way I think of it is Bang Wan cared about So Wee, and I think in a way he was almost envious of So Wee, that he had something something to live for. I think even when he's on the throne, even when Bang Wan's on the throne, you can see he's not fully content. He almost wished he had kind of a life like that, and he almost kind of desires that. Almost seems that in his heart he desires something of that kind of friendship, that kind of loyalty, that kind of whatever it is. There's this longing. Really. It's just like this longing, and you almost root for Bang Wan. It's hard because you're rooting.
Yeah.
You're rooting for him the entire show. You're like, I hope this guy turns out well. And even So Wee, tells Bang Wan, I thought you were good. And it just shows you the power of sin, and that ultimately it corrupted Bang Wan, and his lust for power superseded everything else. And it kind of shows you that the picture almost of a sinner who needs to kind of lay his arms down and turn to Christ in repentance. And until you do that, if you keep holding on to that power, that lust for power, it will destroy you. Mm-hmm. And ultimately destroyed Bang Wan. Obviously as the years go on, but yeah, so interesting things there. Mm-hmm. A lot of things to dissect. I mean, I've only seen it once. We've only seen it once. So I mean, we're just talking.
We'd like to watch it again.
We're just talking off the top of our heads here. It's not like we're masters or kind of, we've seen it several times. But the story is so rich with different themes going on that you can go on and talk about it for a long time. So
okay, so favorite characters.
Favorite characters.
Who is your number one favorite character, and who's your number two?
Okay.
And why?
All right. Bang Wan is my number one character.
If you can't tell, because he talks about him a lot.
Bang Wan is the best. Bang Wan is my single favorite character of any Korean drama, period. End of discussion. He's the number one. He's just the actor who plays him. I don't know his name.
Jung
Gilk.
Yeah.
Incredible
Harrison
performance.
Ford of Korea.
Incredible performance. His delivery, his mannerisms. He's just in control the entire time. He basically steals the second half of the series once he comes on the scene. It almost like once he came on the scene, it kind of breathed fresh life into the series. It kind of shifted from
just the two guys.
Yeah, who was his father? Namjoon, who was kind of the antagonist at that point. And once Namjoon dies, it goes into Bang Wan, and Bang Wan comes on the scene, and he's just a force. He's a force to be reckoned with.
And the actor's very charismatic.
Very charismatic. Yeah. The way he just
flamboyant.
Talks. Yes, he really is good. You really feel like this guy is in full control. And the great thing about his character is that you have no idea what his intentions are.
Yes.
or his motivations. They keep flipping, and he does such a good job of hiding his tells on what exactly is his motivation. At one point you think that he's virtuous and he's going to him and So Wee are going to be aside one another forever, and then another moment you think that this guy's a wicked tyrant and needs to be eliminated. And there's just several scenes throughout. My favorite scenes in the entire show are just him and So Wee talking and going back and forth, and just the writing.
Good dialogue.
The dialogue was fantastic. And
it was funny too.
Yeah, it was great. It was great, and they were going back and forth, and just So Wee obviously is the greatest swordsman, and Bang Wan is the greatest political leader. Mm-hmm. And Bang Wan wants So Wee, And So Wee is also a great, he's a great mind, obviously a political mind and a strategist. He plays the game throughout the whole movie.
I thought it was huge how, and I didn't pick this up till I started watching some of it a second time, but the king, who is Bang Wan's father, I think one of the characters says something to him like, you always refer to Bang Wan as if he's your firstborn, even though he is not.
Yeah.
Because he has an older brother, but it's because of just his personality, and his abilities, as a warrior, and just everything about him.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of straight up introduces to you, and it's just like, okay, this guy's like a force of nature,
Yeah, like Nam So is like he's
Sanho?
No, Sanho, no, his father.
Oh, Namjan.
Namjan, obviously is Sanho's father, and he's the main antagonist.
Is that your second favorite?
No, but I'm through the first half of the movie, but like he's not a threat in terms of like he's gonna go out and kill a whole bunch of people. Obviously Namjan is more of a political threat, and he has people in power, but Bang Wan is like he's like kind of both. He has his soldiers, but he also is a great warrior himself, and you learn later on that it was So Wee's father that taught Bang Wan how to fight, and that's also another interesting dynamic of it. But needless to say, Bang Wan, my favorite character by far. The actor who played him did a fantastic job. The writing for his character, his unpredictability, it was just a tour de force performance. I loved it, even to the very end when he's sitting on the throne. Great character. So that was my number one. Give me your number one, and then I'll come back and give my second.
Yeah, my number one was Nam Sanho. He was my favorite character. He was just a very interesting character from the very beginning, and I felt like he, in some ways, for me at least, he was like a big part of the plot, because he was the guy that you wanted to see redeemed. And I felt like a lot of the plot for me was like, are they going to redeem his character or not? And like there was a desire for the character to be redeemed. And in some ways it was similar to the Count of Monte Cristo, where you have two friends and one kind of betrays the other, but it was different in that you really like the friend. Like in Count of Monte Cristo, his father had so much power and so much influence, and he was kind of just doing what he could to save him. And I felt like the moments that, like the huge moments for me, were the moments where he kind of showed who he really was, that he really did care for Hui, or that he really did love his sister. Those were such great moments for me. One of my favorites was his relationship with Hui's sister, who's adorable. She's probably my second favorite character. But she always liked him, like had a crush on him when she was a young teenager, and I think he just thought of her as like a young, like a little sister or something. But as the show goes on, and he ends up saving her from death, because his father's like, get rid of her, she can die, I don't care about her, and Sanho fights for her to protect her and everything. And then in the end, whenever Sanho ultimately just turns completely against his father and says, let's get out of here, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to get you out. And that moment was like a huge moment for me personally. Like I was very moved by that.
Yeah.
And he's even willing to die for her. And so I feel like all the moments with him, to me, like where he was showing like, who he really was, or when he was ultimately redeemed, were big moments for me, because I felt like that was like my desire. It was like, I want this guy to be redeemed. Like that was like my heart through a lot of it. So I feel like he and he was just an amazing actor. He was really, really good. I feel like he showed the his conflicting feelings really well without even having to say anything. It was just like his facial expressions. You could read like a whole bunch of stuff in his facial expressions. Yeah. Which I thought
he was another character that was very interesting, and he would you never knew what his motivations were.
Yeah. It wasn't always clear. But like you could tell a lot was going on,
There was definitely a lot of going on in his head. Yeah. But he did a very good job, and I think that emotionally, I think he was kind of the driving force.
He was kind of the heart in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, he just he brought a lot of emotion to the character, you know, and you know, you wanted to see him redeemed. You're rooting for him the entire time. But there are also times where you're just like, God, what is he doing?
Yeah,
you
there's
know?
sometimes where you're frustrated.
You're frustrated
for
with
sure.
the
You're
character.
Like, what are you doing?
And I would say the same thing with Bang Wan. I mean, Bang Wan,
Yeah.
you're just like, you're rooting for this guy. You're like, come on, like this guy is so cool. Please turn out to be good. And obviously
Yeah.
that's not the case. But
And I loved how
Yeah.
how if I don't know if you guys know what the term foil is. Like in literature, if the characters are foils, they're usually characters that are alongside each other but are opposites or very different from each other, and that their differences bring out the character traits of both. So, like for example, Sherlock and Watson would be foils because Sherlock Holmes is completely different than Watson, but the fact of them being together like pronounces their differences more clearly.
yeah,
And so I thought it was cool that Hui and Sanho were very much foils to each other, and yet they were best friends. So they were like absolutely best friends, but they were very different. And even like in the beginning, like you kind of got to see a little bit of their personality. Hui was a great character. I really loved the character of Hui as well. I didn't think he was like the heart of it, but I thought he was a great character. But his personality was kind of, before all the crazy stuff happens to him, he was kind of like a upbeat, light, like pure character, fun-loving character. Sanho was more like, I think you could tell he was the kind of guy that struggled with his dark side and like was a little bit more brooding. And I liked how like Hui would just bring a smile, like make Sanho laugh, or like that kind of person, like they kind of went off each other really well, where like Hui knew how to like kind of bring out a side of Sanho that maybe Sanho wasn't usually able to bring out, you know, in his family life and with his father and all that.
yeah.
And so I love that, like how they were very different, but they like cared about each other even though they were different, and they loved each other for their differences. I thought that was cool.
That was very cool.
Yeah.
That was a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to take Sanho. I mean, obviously,
As your second?
yeah, as my second character, and
It's funny because I was gonna say Bang Wan as my second.
yeah. Were you going to see Bang
Oh
Wan?
yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to go with So-Wee. I'll go
Okay.
with So-Wee here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's my second favorite character. And, you know, I you know, obviously he's the main, you know, he's the main protagonist throughout the whole story. And you're kind of looking through this story through his eyes and, you know, what happens to him. And there's a lot that happens to him in the story. Several things. And I really liked his performance. I don't think he was, I don't think it was the best performance in terms of, you know, obviously you guys had some heavy hitters and Bang Wan and others, but I think he did a very good job. And his character, it was interesting for me because obviously, like Rachel said, like he was upbeat. Like in the beginning of the story, he was just like this sweet guy that cared for his sister, just humble. You know, he was happy just to have rice. That's what he said. He was content just to have rice, and you know, and just to live a simple life. Live a simple life. Obviously, his family name was discredited, and he was looked lowly. He was probably the lowest class because his father was, you know, he was executed for rebellion against the regime wrongfully, but you know, So-Wee and his sister had to pay the price for that. And so here you see this guy, you know, humble, you know, with very little, but you can see he's happy and content.
Yeah.
And it's only until
That was endearing part of who
Very-
he was.
yeah.
That he was just like at the beginning, you know, they're talking about like their goals and aims, and like Sanho is talking about, you know, I want to, you know, rise above like being thought of as an illegitimate son and all this stuff, and Hui's like, I want rice, like
yeah.
to eat, you know.
He's not out for fortune and glory, but I mean but So-Wee also has this inner drive, and he knows who he is, and you know, and he comes from, you know, his father's, you know, he was the greatest swordsman, you know, in his day, and he passed on that legacy to So-Wee, and so So-Wee also feels like a responsibility, like he he knows who he is, and he knows the talent that he has, and he kind of he wants to he wants to get his family out of poverty. And so like you're kind of going through this story, and obviously he gets double crossed by his best friend's father, and he ends up being thrown into the military on the front lines, and all odds are against Soe throughout the entire movie. They feel Soe is a threat, but he's resilient, and where his character turns, his character turns from this humble, happy-go-lucky guy to a guy that's burnt on vengeance against his best friend, his best friend's father, and whoever wronged him, and it almost destroys him. But you see the redemption that comes, when he realizes that vengeance doesn't pay in the end. And he sees his best friend's father dead, and almost his best friend dead, and he comes to the end of himself and saying, what have I done? And you see his character turn from that point on later in the story. So I like just the character arc of Soe. I love the character arc of Soe.
Yeah, he does have a good character arc, for sure.
It's like the high, and then he kind of brought low with very many disappointments along the way. Obviously his sister.
I love the character he becomes. I think that, like, I wasn't sure how I liked him at the beginning, and then I wasn't sure for a lot of the middle, because his character, it was almost like the soul was knocked out of him, and you're like,
you're
you
like,
don't
what
even know
happened
who
to
this guy is anymore.
Like, this guy's just killing everyone.
Yeah, and then by the end, he finds himself again, and he's like an even better character than he was at the beginning, because he's wiser, but he's also still like that sweet, fun guy. I love his smile. I think he has a really sweet smile.
Me too.
And I love
such a sweet smile.
Yeah, but I like yeah.
Lovely
anyways.
smile. He has dreamy eyes.
No, but he has a sweet smile. It's like almost like a kid or something.
Yeah, he's very he's definitely
like almost like he has like a little I don't know, like that kind of like innocent kind of vibe.
He does.
Okay, so we gotta move because we're at an hour and 8 minutes now. So I just want to say real quickly, I would say probably my second favorite is Bang Wan, and I don't need to go into all that because Grant already went into what an interesting character he is.
Yeah.
I also shout out to I would have to
the sister.
shout out to the sister. I love this. I think she's just adorable, and I think she adds a huge part, like a huge emotional part to the story.
Yeah. Shout out to the general too.
Oh yes, Cheeto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheeto was.
He
good.
was cool.
He was definitely cool. Like he kind of rode with Soe
He was definitely
throughout.
a cool
He was
character.
he's looking out for Soe the entire time.
Yeah.
He's kind of like his comfort throughout the whole movie, and he doesn't do too much. I mean, obviously he fights a lot.
Yeah, he's
and
very
stuff
loyal.
Like that. He's just a loyal, kind of faithful character that is there for Soe, and I don't think Soe becomes what he becomes without Cheeto. So
Yeah.
Shout out to him. Good performance. Love his character. The whole deal, and obviously his friends. They kind of grow on you.
Yeah, they do.
Moonbach is kind of like
Yeah.
the comic relief out of the whole movie, and you see his black teeth, and then
Yeah.
it's kind of comical through. It's kind of the lighter side of the show, because the show can be a little bit depressing and kind of melancholy. What do you say?
Sometimes at moments, yeah.
So,
So, now just discuss like favorite scenes, favorite parts, things we thought were silly, things we liked
yes.
about it. Favorite moments.
Wow. I mean, we can.
There's
go
a
on
lot
for
of
days.
moments.
we can go on for days.
Okay, one thing I loved, I'll just say, that I thought was really cool, was how the scene at the beginning of the show where Hui and Sanho like storm the gates, and they fight the soldiers so that Hui can put the general's arrow
Yes,
on
yeah.
the desk
Yeah.
to
That was
prove
so
that he
cool.
can get into the
You stole my thunder.
to the
That's
exam.
exactly,
But I
love
loved
that
how they paralleled that, and at the last scene they it was almost like a foreshadowing of the end, where they did the same thing in the end, but it was like this time it was for real, and this time like they sacrificed their lives, but it was just
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
I love that how they had that. They did it in the beginning, and then
Yeah,
they did it
I
in
didn't
the
even
end.
think about that, but yeah, that's
Oh,
true. Yeah. That's a good scene. Yeah, I think that I love that scene. I love the scene. I love the fight scene between Soe and Sanho. I think it's epic. For a lot of different reasons. Here are two friends, that are sparring. They're not really fighting with swords. They're sparring because
What is this? Which is this the exam?
this is the
talking
exam.
about? Okay,
Yeah. Well, it kind of leads up to the exam. So this is the exam to get into the army of the eventual king, but the great general at that time. So Wee is really fighting. If he wins, if he beats San Ho, then he gets into this he gets into the army, and obviously his life will exceed, and his reputation and all the things that he's kind of been desiring will kind of be his if he wins. And he ends up beating San Ho, but the unfortunate instance that happens is that when he rises up in victory, San Ho, who seemed to be knocked unconscious, rises up and knocks him in the back of the head. And So Wee is laid to the ground, and they choose San Ho as the victor, or show him as the victor. And what happens after that moment changes So Wee's life forever.
Yeah.
Because
It's kind of like a Ben-Hur moment,
yeah,
when
it's the turning
tiles
point.
fell off the roof kind of thing.
Right, it's the turning point in the movie. So I love the scene. I love the fight. It's hard to watch because you're like, you're rooting for So Wee, and then all of a sudden things are about to change in his relationship with his best friend. And so I thought the scene was well acted, and one of the most memorable scenes. So that's a memorable scene.
that was definitely a memorable scene.
Yeah.
I just love anytime Bang Wan flares out his fan. Yeah. Those are great fun.
Yeah.
It's like, he does this, and then all the soldiers stop.
Yeah.
It's just cool. It was a cool touch,
Yeah, Bang Wan is, he's epic in every scene.
Yeah.
And there's the countenance and the cadence in which he talks. He
talks from his
But then
chest.
all of a sudden he'll just start yelling. And you're just like, wow, this guy's...
He'll stand outside his father's door.
Yeah, and I will say this, probably one of my favorite scenes. I was going to say my favorite scene, but I always say that. But one of my favorite scenes is the scene where Bang Wan and So Wee, when you're first seeing that they have an alliance together, and Bang Wan and So Wee have this ploy to fake Bang Wan's death, in terms of fooling what's this? I always forget his name. Nam John.
Yeah.
And you're rooting for this to happen. You're rooting for their alliance to happen, and you don't know what's going on. You think that So Wee kills Bang Wan here, and everything is going to just be torn apart. And later on, you figure out that So Wee and Bang Wan were plotting together to fool Nam John.
Yeah.
Nam John. And it's just a great scene.
Yeah,
and
when
it
they
really,
show up at the court and he thinks they're dead, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and
the look on his face.
Yeah, and it just kind of that scene kind of pulls you back into the story, and you're like, all right, this guy Bang Wan is kind of an epic character. How they fooled Nam John and what's going to happen going forward. So I thought that was a good scene to kind of bring you into the second.
That scene was good. And I also think even San Ho's part in that scene was good too, because the fact that I was very surprised. That scene surprised me. I didn't expect San Ho to rush and try to save Wee in that moment. I didn't know that that's where San Ho was emotionally. I thought he was still very much. It was it revealed where he really was. And I think that's one of the things about the show. You don't always know where people are.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you're like, okay, he really does care about Wee. When it comes to everything else, it doesn't matter. He's going to be there, trying to save him. Even though it's going against his dad, it's going against Bang Wan, and it's just going against everybody,
Right.
So that was a really cool part of it too. I thought.
I know what you're going to mention. I know the scene that you're going to mention next.
What?
San Ho and So Wee's sister, how he protects her.
Oh yes, I kind of already mentioned that, but that's definitely when I was talking about his character. But that is a huge moment. When he covers her, he's willing to die for her. I was just that was great.
Now do you think that there was a romantic interest between
Good question. This is a question that is kind of hard to answer. But we've discussed it a lot. You know, did Sanho love Hui's sister in a romantic way? It doesn't seem to be at the beginning. He just, you know, she thinks she's cute. He cares about her a lot, just like he cares about Hui.
Yeah.
But I think by the end, I don't know what you would say, but I feel like by the end, it's like a realization that comes later on because, you know, by the end, you start to realize, you know, he has that, you know, she, you know, after she dies, he finds the little sash that she embroidered for him, and you know, he breaks down weeping, which, okay, you know, like, he cared a lot about her. But then he has that sash, like, on his sword for the rest of the show. And you notice, like, anytime he needs inspiration or anytime he's feeling down, he's always looking at the sash. Like, it meant, like, she meant a lot to him. And I think that the more you watch it, the more you're like, I think it was more than just, like, a sister or a friend.
Yeah. I would say this. In the beginning, I just thought it was just a sister. I thought
yeah.
I mean, I think he just cared for her, like, as a sister.
Yeah.
You know, as a brother, because he's done that throughout pretty much his whole life. I mean, if it wasn't for Sanho, I mean, So-Wi
and his sister
would have. So, you know, they had this connection, but, you know, as the story progresses and later on, you see, you know, Sanho kind of crying out, you know, almost, you know, basically he's almost dying, and he thinks that he's about to die, and he's talking to himself. There's one scene, and I thought it was a really good scene. He said, and he was saying that, you know, he was hoping that he could, you know, face her, you know, because obviously his sister's dead, and like, he could face her again.
It was one of the motivations for doing the right thing.
Right.
Was like that when he died, would he be able to face her? And I think that was kind of huge. You're like, okay, like, if she's a big deal to him, you know.
You're just seeing somebody as a sister.
Yeah.
I mean, are you really kind of worried about, like, just, you know, facing that person, or is it just something more? I mean,
and I think a lot of it too was like, you know, like when she died, you know, he went through, you know, like, it showed him kind of like in, like, the drug house, basically, like, miserable, and he said the statement, you know, like, she was the only person who trusted me and cared about me, basically, is gone.
Yeah.
And I think that it was like the realization of that, like, once she was gone, he was so busy. I mean, I think he cared about her, but he was so busy with so many other things when she was alive that it was almost like he didn't realize until she was gone what she meant to him.
Yeah.
And I think, too, it's interesting at the end, and this is what really kind of made me see it that way more as well, is at the end when him and Hui start to reconcile. It shows Hui, like, starts to realize how much she means to Sanho. And at one point, he even apologizes to Sanho and says, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't really, like, think about your pain. I was just thinking about my own pain, you know, that my sister died and everything, but I didn't think about your pain, like, that you care about her in this whole other way, you know. And when he kind of gives him back the sash, you know, that he had found, that she had given to him, and he kind of, like, Sanho's kind of breaking down there, and then even, like, there was a moment where Sanho was sleeping and Hui's looking at him, and he sees him, like, clutching like the sash in his sleep, and it looks like Hui is like recognizing, like, wow, like, Sanho really, like, my sister is a big deal to him, you know?
Yeah.
And there's even one moment when they're in the library, and he's like, comes to help him find information or whatever, which is a whole nother thing. And he's like, you know, get out of here. Hui's like, get out of here. I don't want you to be involved in this, you know, because he doesn't want him to be in danger or whatever. And Sanho's like, shut up. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for your sister. Which is like a joke, because he's obviously doing it for Hui. But in that moment, Hui looks at him, like, with this very serious look on his face. And I think it was like a realization, like, okay, like, Sanho loves my sister, you know?
Yeah.
And even at the end when he was dying, that was one of the last things he talked about. So I feel like I think it's cool how it's like implied, but it's not out there. I think that makes it almost more interesting.
I agree.
Because it's not like, you You know,
This is
you
like-
almost have to feel it yourself, like
Yeah.
while watching it.
And that's how that's how the series is, and that's how the show is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like you're feeling it out throughout.
It doesn't tell you what's going on.
You know,
have to figure it out.
yeah, and then it kind of leads to good discussion because it kind of leaves certain things open ended that you can discuss. All right, so let's wrap it up because we've gone on for an hour and 20 minutes, probably way exceeding people's attention. But
Yeah.
all right, so I will ask you, okay, out of 10, what would you rank? Okay, obviously highest being 10, lowest being 1. What would you rank My Country, The New Age? What would you rate it?
I would say, I mean, do you mean like
I'm
out
just
of K-dramas, kind of, or out of?
yeah,
anything,
out
kind
of K dramas. That's okay.
I mean, out of K-dramas, so far, like of what I've seen, I would probably give it like a 9 out of 10, honestly, because it just had a lot. I mean, it was just really good, really epic, really intriguing characters. You could talk about it forever. And there's been other ones that I've really liked. Like I would say Crash Landing is probably out of K-dramas that I've seen. It's a 10. Because there's some flaws to this show, like we talked about with the stabbing and the surviving multiple stabbings, and there's moments of lull within the middle of it, and there's sometimes it can get confusing. So it's not a perfect show. I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means, but
yeah,
I would say just my overall like feeling after seeing it was like 9.
yeah,
What about you?
yeah. Well, I will say this: it's like, you know, with these K dramas, you know, you have 16 episodes. It's you know, in movie quality. I mean, this was a movie. I mean, the production was huge in this movie. I mean, in this series. So I mean, you're getting movie-like quality for 16 episodes. But you know, telling a story like that, telling a 16, 17 hour movie, you know, you're gonna have some lulls. You're gonna have some you know, downtimes. You're gonna have some flaws in the story. You know, it's very difficult to wield, you know, that kind of production and keep your interest throughout. I would give this a solid 8.5. 8.5. Okay, so a little bit under 9, but still a great story, still a great K-drama series. I'd rank it right under. I would rank it right under Crash Landing on You and Vagabond. But
Yeah, Vagabond.
8.5. You know, great acting throughout. Love the characters. I love where the story. I love the climax. Probably my favorite ending to any K drama.
Oh yeah, I would definitely say
For
that.
sure.
The ending was even better than Crash Landing.
Yeah, the
like
ending-
it was just a powerful,
Very
punch of an
powerful.
ending.
Very
Yeah.
you know, very powerful. Obviously some flaws. I would say, you know, the soundtrack, the predictability, certain things. The soundtrack wasn't really that good, to be honest, in my opinion.
There were a few things
There
that
were
were
a couple,
good, but
there were a couple of songs, but I mean,
Yeah.
compared to like Crash Landing on You, While You Were
Yeah.
Sleeping, you know, other K dramas, I would say that this one kind of lacks, you know, just
they had
lacks a
some.
punch.
They had some tracks and moments where
Yeah.
it felt like they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But there were also good tracks too.
Yeah.
I would say.
So high marks for acting, cinematography,
Story.
low marks for you know, obviously soundtrack, predictability, unrealistic kind of swordsman kind of action scenes where, I mean, the action was good, but like we said before, there were times where people were getting swords thrusted in their stomach, and then you know, the next scene they were out there fighting with no problem. It just, you know, you don't almost have to kind of, you know, push aside all reason in order to kind of get past that. I mean, you try to do your best, but it wasn't necessary. You know, they could have lightened up on certain scenes where people got stabbed and thrashed with swords. So, you know, they could have done better there. But overall, like, you know, very enjoyable. You know,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to watch it again.
I'll say this. It's one of and we've seen, like I said, we've seen a good number of K dramas now. And I would say this one like stays with you. Like you think about it. Like it's one of those ones where it makes you think, and you can't just like move on from it. Like
Yeah.
like all right, we're done with that. Let's watch something else. Like it's like you're still thinking about
Yeah.
that one, and like it's still coming back, and you kind of want to watch it again. it's powerful, and like there's scenes in it that are huge. Like we would look at each other and be like, "Whoa, that was crazy," you know, like.
So the powers, you know, the power and the weightiness of especially the end, and it, you know, obviously the last like 5 episodes I would say are fantastic, especially when Bang Won comes on the scene. And that overshadows some of its weaknesses. And what I would say, it overshadows some of the weaknesses. Whereas, like the third character, the third role of the girl, just really didn't go anywhere, and it was kind of really pointless. And that kind of took away. If they had a good romantic kind of chemistry between,
maybe that would have added.
that would have added, you know, something more to the table, and it wouldn't have had.
Although it's almost kind of nice because it wasn't like. The bromance was kind of in the forefront, and I feel like if the girl was too much in it, it would have upstaged the bromance in a way.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if they would have made her character more interesting, which it was looking like in the very beginning of the show, and they really didn't give her much to do. She was just kind of sitting in Warhu's house, and you know, the politics there, no one really cares. So, but overall, 8.5 out of 10. Good series. I enjoyed it. We will definitely rewatch it again.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
and if you watch it, please you know, comment and tell us what you thought. And
if you have any comments, if you disagree on you know, how we saw things about the show, let us know your favorite characters, your favorite scenes. We like to geek out over a lot of these things.
One last thing I just wanted to point out really quickly. That's kind of cool. I never really thought about, this is the last thing I'm going to say, but
always with the last word.
Yeah. But, and I wanted to bring this out, and I was talking about Sanho as my favorite character, but someone actually brought this up to me when I was explaining the plot to them, and I was like, oh wow, that's crazy. That Sanho and Hui kind of remind you of David and Jonathan, because, you know, you have Jonathan, have Jonathan's father, Saul, who is evil and who hates David and is trying to kill David, and then you have Jonathan, who is loyal to David, which is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Like, I love the story of David, and also the friendship between Jonathan and David. So that it kind of reminded me of that. Not completely, because Jonathan never, you know, Jonathan was a completely righteous, upright man, whereas Sanho had a lot of flaws. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that out.
Very good. All right. Well, we will we'll see you on the next time here on, I don't know what we're calling this. I guess movie reviews with Grant Rachel.
Costanzo's.
Yeah, Costanzo's movie review.
We'll figure it out.
But all right, we'll see you next time. Later.
Bye.